Today, we will learn how to gain a fresh perspective on what we may perceive to be difficult relationships. The way this is done in a Heartful Communication workshop is through a very special exercise.
The way that I enjoy doing it is I take a piece of paper and I draw 2 feet, or 2 shoes, usually feet, on the piece of paper. Just give me a regular A4 sheet of paper, and I put it on the floor. When somebody has a very challenging relationship with someone else in their life, and sometimes that person may, by the way, have passed, but it continues to really disturb, trouble them. One of the most extraordinary ways that I've used for myself, and that I've seen that can transform that relationship, whether it's in an inner way or in an outer way, is when somebody finds the capacity, the willingness, the generosity of heart to say, let me really try to understand this other human being by becoming them temporarily. So maybe I can tell you about one particular example which I've always remembered. It was so powerful and so moving. I was asked to go and work with some young people. They were late teens or early 20s, who were like the rejects of society, you could say. They had been thrown out of school. They had been thrown out of their families. They were like, they had formed a kind of gang almost, you know. And they were very angry, very bitter, often very violent in their behavior. And I was asked to go spend some time with them and see if this whole approach of nonviolent communication could be offered in such a way that they could use it. Now, that was quite a challenge because, you know, I'm old, and they were from a very disadvantaged background, and I'm not. Anyway, we connected because I really liked them, and through humor and respect. You know, I respected them. Anyway, one of the things that after working with them for some time in the morning that I found I was able to do, because we had a connection, was this exercise of seeing if you could stand in the shoes of somebody who you have had a lot of difficulty with. Now, this young man told us a story about how he was completely alienated from his father. Now, I'm not going to use his language, but you can imagine that every other word was a swear word in his way of expressing. There is so much anger in that. So he had first of all told us with great colourful language about how much he hated his father, who had beaten him, thrashed him from when he was little, and he had then left home, and you know, he hadn't actually seen his father for many years actually. So he told us about this, but he had enough willingness to try to understand, because of course there was a pain inside this young man. You know, this wasn't only anger. Beneath anger is always another emotion, always. Hurt, deep pain. So he said he was willing to have a go. In front of the others, by the way, enormous courage. So first of all, I let him talk again about his father. And then there was a moment of pause, and I said, do you feel ready to now see if you could be him and enter into his world? And he said, yeah. So when you feel that they're ready, then you invite them to then take a step forward and stand on the feet, in the shoes. And it's that movement of, you know, you actually physically move your body into the shoes. And then you begin to speak using I. Not they or you or he or she, nothing. I am. So the first thing they need to say is I am, and then he used his father's name. And he started to talk as his father. And he had his eyes closed. Now, what you also need to know is that all the other young people in this, this room had been up until this exercise, joking and, using foul language and so forth. But nevertheless, they were present. But when this exercise happened, there was pin drop silence. And he stood into his father's shoes and he started to talk. And he said things like, you are going to have a better life than I ever had. And his hand is going like this, like he's beating, like he's thrashing. And he said, you are going to be a man. You're going to make something of your life. You're going to be somebody. You're going to achieve something. You're not going to have the shit life, the terrible life that I had. And his hand is going like this, and then tears start to roll down his face. And he's got tattoos, he's piercings, this guy, tough as nails. And, I'm standing next to him, by the way, and I have my hand just very gently on his back, just gentle support. And so, he's saying all this, and then he stops, and he has tears in his eyes, and he opens his eyes, and he looked, and he said, he used a swear word, and then he said, he loved me. My father loved me. He wanted the best for me. And some of the other young people also had tears, and I had tears in my eyes, realizing that this was the most extraordinary moment for this young man, of understanding that although the action, the behavior, the strategy, the approach of his father was horrible, it hurt him in every way, it humiliated him, it physically hurt him, it like beat him down. He thought that he was nothing because of all this. By standing in his father's shoes, he realized that his father didn't know any other way to try to get him to be somebody, except by trying to make him into a man by these beatings and so forth, But this realization that his father cared about him, that he wanted him to have a better life. And then, he said, I'm moved thinking about it even all these years later. He said, I'm going to go and try and find my father. Now, I don't know whether he ever did, because time passed and I lost contact with that group. And I have remembered that example always, and I often tell it in our workshops. It's very moving for everybody to hear this. And I did tell it in a workshop here, actually, once, and a middle-aged man came up to me in the coffee break, after we had this experience, and he said, I also hated my father. He beat me to make me study. The other young man, it wasn't to study, it was, just to be somebody. But he beat him regularly before exams. He said, I have also hated my father. And now I'm beginning to see that he so wanted me to do well, to fulfill my potential. And he was weeping, this man was weeping also. So this is what you might call radical empathy. It requires a lot of courage, to be willing to do this, because then the story, the narrative that you've had for perhaps most of your life is shattered. That narrative which you held and which in some way was a defense for you, some kind of a justification for you, that narrative is no longer there, and a new narrative is there. And it can be very, very shattering. And yet, that's what seems to me that transformation is all about. Something has to shatter. Something has to go. Something has to be destroyed, whether it's gently or violently, whatever, for some new awareness and new possibility of living our lives in a different way, with more authenticity, more courage, more love, actually. In other words, that it's the heart that is increasingly guiding how we are and the choices that we make in life.
Thank you for tuning in to this 4-episode introduction of Heartful Communication. If you'd like to explore Heartful Communication further or participate in an online or in-person course, please write to hc@heartfulness.org.